like you to please rise to your feet and give me the loudest applause you possibly can for Professor Rozalind.
Wow. Thank you. I am humbled by your support. As I stand up here this evening, I can feel my heart pounding hard and fast in my chest. And the reason for that is not because I am nervous of speaking in front of groups, for that is something that I have done almost every day for the last 17 years. The reason that my heart is pounding with such an intensity is because deep inside of my being, I can feel an intensity of passion, a passion for what I want to share with you this evening that is just bursting to find a way out. So I thank you in advance for spending the time to share with me, the time to allow me to share with you some of my passion. In my life, I have found it incredibly enriching to be able to search into the texts and the writings of people who have been great thinkers. And with many great thinkers, what I find is that they have this ability of saying an enormous amount in very few words. So when I've been standing on a podium for about an hour, I start to question the depth of my own wisdom in comparison. The first little quote I would like to read you is by a gentleman by the name of Walter Bagehot. And Walter said, "Public opinion is a permeating influence, and it exacts obedience to itself. It requires us to think other people's thoughts, to speak other people's words, and to follow other people's habits." There is, in this world of ours, a collective dictation. That is to say that there is a permeating influence which we categorize as public opinion. And this dictation of the collective is not down to any one single one of us. It is not down to any particular gender. It is equally owned and fashioned by both male and female. And it stands separate from each single person here as its own force. Public opinion, dictation. And the public opinion and the dictation that has passed through the lives of our ancestors has carried with it a very consistent theme. And that theme is essentially the message that says, don't feel and don't think. So where did this all start? Well, like everything has its roots, it has its beginning. And there was a time, a long way behind in our history, when amongst men and women, men became very fearful. And they were actually fearful of women. Because back in those days, they didn't have the physiology books that we have today. They didn't understand where babies came from. They didn't realize that the reason a woman's belly would swell and new life would come upon the community was down to the fact that she had had sexual intercourse with somebody. Even that wasn't known. It was a mystery. Suddenly, a woman in the community would produce new life. Now, this was pretty amazing. And the feminine spirit carried with it not only this incredible creative ability, but all those magical aspects of intuition, sensitivity, mysticism, and really, in many ways, was the bridge that allows both genders to pass over and connect with the spiritual side of their lives. It's understandable that such an inexplicable and such a powerful force as the female spirit could be perceived as frightening. And so understandably, the male gender began to suppress that feminine spirit. And we know that over the centuries, this was magnified and increased until it became such a pressure cooker of suppression amongst women that there was an explosion which at the time we called feminism. This is the rooting, this is the seed, this is the actual beginning of this whole disease. The disease of separating us from our thoughts and from our ability to feel. For from be you male or be you female, you contain female energy, and along with that, the ability to feel with an intensity beyond your possible comprehension. But once we've separated ourselves from spirit, what we have done is we've placed ourselves in a position of great fear. For there are, as the great teachers have said, only really two core emotions, the emotion of love and the emotion of fear. As soon as we separate ourselves from our spirit, we separate ourselves from love, and we become centered in fear. Now, fear can lead us to do some very strange things. And one of those things that we will do is to try to control, because to be fearful is to feel out of control. And how has that control manifested? Well, it manifested at one point through religions. Religions actually encourage us, don't think, don't feel. Because if you think or you feel, you become independent of the dictation of others. Please don't perceive me to be saying that I do not have great reverence for the religions of this world. I certainly do. Please don't misinterpret my communication. All that I'm trying to connect with you is some level of understanding that wherever there is hierarchy, there is basically fear and a need to control. And so what has happened is that we've moved on from religion, and the scientists took over. And they said, don't think, don't feel. It's not a good idea. Because as soon as you think or you feel, the collective dictation loses the power. And of course, these days we're moving into modern technology. Me and computers. I have a friend who actually said to me, I remember the day, he said, when I sat you in front of a computer for the first time. He said, I have never seen anyone so nervous. And he was right. This is very, very foreign to me, this modern technology, as I know it is to many of my brothers and sisters. But gradually we have embraced it because it's the collective dictation. And certainly in many ways it serves us incredibly well. To be quite honest with you, I wouldn't be standing here were it not for modern technology, were it not for my ability to utilize communication and travel the way that we have it today. But let's think a little bit further about what this collective dictation really means in our lives. Norman Cousins said something very profound when he said, death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss is what dies in us while we live. And for so many of us, what dies inside of us while we live is our ability to feel and our ability to think independently. And if we're not thinking and we're not feeling, are we truly alive? Are we truly alive? This is a very, I think, basic question that we should ask ourselves. Elias Root Beadle said, half the work done in this world is to make things appear what they're not. And how true this is when it comes to health and health creation. How much it's in evidence that the medical fraternity can come up with 2 and 2 and make it 7.5. Or even worse, minus 7.5. Let's take sunshine as an example. Without sunshine, this planet would be a black ashen ball with no life forms on it whatsoever. Getting burnt in the sun is never a good idea. And I had the very embarrassing experience recently of doing a talk out in a wonderful venue in Sebastopol in an apple orchard at the annual Jamboree. And for those of you who haven't experienced that, I encourage you to join next year. It is a tremendous bundle of fun. And I was talking to a group of people and explaining to them how getting natural sunlight, not only on your skin, but in your eyes, was absolutely paramount to health. But on no account did I recommend burning. Unfortunately, whilst I was giving this lecture, I got burnt. It's a case of do as I say, not as I do in that instance. But what are they telling us about sunshine? They're telling us the sun gives you cancer. Don't go in the sun. Well, did you know that unless you go in the sun, it is not possible for you to create vitamin D for yourself? There is a type of cholesterol in your skin called ergosterol, and ergosterol actually changes into vitamin D when it's met with the rays of the sun. So hang on a minute, if we don't go in the sun, we have a problem with vitamin D. What implications does that have? Well, one implication is that if we haven't got vitamin D, we can't utilize calcium. Now, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the whole concept that we need calcium to have strong bones. Something you might not be aware of is that the calcium mineral is extremely important in maintaining our emotional equilibrium. And in fact, a deficiency in calcium can result in depression. So we don't get enough sun, we get problems with vitamin D, we get problems with calcium, and before we know it, we're suffering from depression. We need to get sunlight straight in through our eyes. By all means, wear sunglasses when you need to drive and it's unsafe to do so without glasses, or if you're skiing and the reflection of the snow would make your eyes sore. But please, don't wear sunglasses to look cool. Because when you wear sunglasses to look cool, what you're doing is you are reducing your ability to feel good psychologically. You know, in England, we are renowned for having a somewhat damp climate. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that. But anyway, nevertheless, some days I will go out and it will be very cloudy, it's been raining. And what we find is people walking along and you say good morning and they go, and that's about all you get. But on the few occasions when we have brilliantly sunny days, I walk through my village and I say, good morning. And everybody lights up and they say, morning, Rosie. Because we all know each other in my village. It's very small. People's mood change. Mood changes as soon as the sun is out. So if we're not getting enough sun, we're not getting our D, we're not getting our calcium, we're depressed, what happens? We find we can't sleep. We're suffering from insomnia. When you're depressed, there is a tendency to wake up in the night and not be able to get back to sleep. So we wake up exhausted. Do we feel like exercising? No, we're too tired to exercise. Do we feel we can cope with the day ahead? No, we can't. So what do? We reach for junk foods, fast foods, and stimulants. Those junk foods, fast foods, and stimulants are filling our body with toxins, plus the fact that because we're not exercising, we're reducing our ability to keep our body clean. Every time you move, there are changes in pressure as you turn and bounce and jump and move forwards and back. These changes in pressure are what enable your lymphatic fluids to be circulated around your body. I mean, I know you all know your circulation, right? You know your blood circulation is pumped round by your heart. And you all know your heart anatomy, I know. It's this shape. It's got an arrow through it. And it's here, okay? Well, that heart is a pump, and it pumps your blood around, but your lymphatics don't have such a thing. They rely on movement. So we've got excessive toxicity coming in through all our fast foods. We've got minimal ability to keep ourselves protected from them because our lymphatic system has slowed right down. And in addition to that, we're not eating an abundance of fresh fruit and vegetables, so we're lacking antioxidants. And guess what happens? We have such a toxic body and so unable to protect itself that our cells gradually become criminal. They no longer listen to the instructions from our brain, and they become cancerous. But hang on a minute, I thought the sun gave you cancer. Something's wrong here. When one has an inquiring mind, you can pursue a line of thought. You can begin to question things. You can begin to ask, what are the facts? And what am I simply swallowing, in many cases in a literal sense, on the basis of an assumption or a trust? One of the things that I've always admired so very much in my beloved partner, Doug Graham, is the degree to which he has an inquiring mind. He never stops searching for the truth, and he's never satisfied with an answer until he's brought it to a conclusion using his own ability to think to do so. I'd like to encourage you just for a moment to be willing to look through a different window. Now, what I mean by a different window is we have this child's television program in the UK. It's called Jackanory. I don't suppose anyone's heard of Jackanory, except the one British person in the entire room. Anyway, Jackanory, they had 3 different shaped windows at the beginning of this child's program. There was a round window, and an arched window, and a square window. And every episode, there'd be this very exciting music. And the person who was doing the commentary would say, "Well, children, which window are we going to look through today?" And nobody knew until the music built up to a crescendo and the camera honed in on one window. Sometimes the arched, sometimes the round, and sometimes the square. And each time we looked through a different window, we saw a completely different thing. You know, when it comes to health, there are essentially also 3 different windows. First of all, we have the window of the medical model. Now, before I pursue this line of thought any further, I would just like to say to you that I do think the medical model have their place in some instances. And it behooves me to share this with you because it is a truth in my own experience. For one thing, I worked for many years, when I was much younger, I worked for many years with horses. And in that experience, I suffered various injuries here and there. And many a time I would end up in what we call the accident and emergency department of the hospital in England, and they would kind of, tell me why it was wrong the wrong way round and how they could pull it back the right way round and such things. One day, I went to bed really fine, and the next morning I woke up with a large piece of metal in my eye. I do not know how it got there. There have been various suggestions that I was having this dream about fighting in some war or battle and got this metal in my eye. In any case, the hospital with their technology were able